Welcome to DM the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. A few weeks ago, I announced I was doing another live stream and Ask Me Anything, Let's Chat Ravenloft type thing. And between that announcement video and me actually doing the live stream, a new Ravenloft product got announced. Ravenloft, The Horrors Within. It felt quite fortuitous because then a few days later at the live stream, we could talk about it. And I did end up talking about it a little bit during the nearly 2-hour live stream. It was only supposed to be 1 hour, but went on for 2. I wanted to do a video giving thoughts and more detail about it based on my experience, not just as a just random D&D YouTuber, but as a big fan of Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft in particular. I'll give an overview, but I've also dug out more information from various sources, not just the news sites from when it was first announced, but 2 EN World threads have a lot of information, and there was a lot of chatter on there. And a video by Nerd Immersion, who interviewed some of the staff who worked on it. I'll include links for all those in the description. So I'll go through the release news and what we know or think it might contain, the artwork, and my thoughts and views. This is the first video of mine you're seeing. Hello, my name is Steve. I am DM the Mists. I cover just Curse of Strahd and just Ravenloft. So if you're wanting to run or currently running Curse of Strahd or a wider Ravenloft campaign, then consider subscribing. I'm probably going to do quite a few videos related to The Horrors Within when it comes out in a few months' time. So if you want to see those, please subscribe. So as part of a wider announcement about sort of the 2026 release schedule, and they're kind of doing 3 seasons. There's a season of horror, which is running April to June, followed by the season of magic, the release of Arcana Unleashed and Deadfall, which looks like it's tied to the Red Wizards of Thay, and then a season of Champions that releases TBC. Well, there's some speculation it could be to do with Dragonlance. I'll talk more about that later. The Horrors Within is labelled a gameplay expansion on one of the promo images I found, whereas something else was labelled adventure expansion. So that probably suggests this is more of a setting book than a campaign or adventure book. So it's probably more like Van Richten's Guide than Curse of Strahd. It's going to contain stuff for players as well as DMs. There's information about subclasses for some of the new 5.5e subclasses, lineages, which are the 3 revisited from Van Richten's Guide, plus they already updated the Dampier lineage in a different source. But then there's a 4th one as well, Lupin. And it's funny, I was going to do a video at some point about the Van Richten's Guide lineages and talk about ones I was surprised they didn't include. And I was surprised they didn't include a lycanthrope sort of version. And I'm assuming Lupin is filling that gap. Yeah, there's backgrounds, dark gifts, which are being treated like origin feats, and some other stuff. And then other stuff that's included includes information on Cthulhu. So Cthulhu's in Ravenloft now, apparently, but Cthulhu's also got a stat block. So that's awesome. And there's speculation based on that. Are other Darklords going to have stat blocks? One of the biggest criticisms of Van Richten's Guide from those who didn't like it was that the Darklords didn't have their own stat blocks. They were just said, use the Knight stat block or the Spy stat block or the Noble stat block, stuff like that. And people disappointed that they didn't get cool, unique stat blocks. So maybe this is a sign that we're going to finally see that. One of the promo things I saw said that there's going to be, and I quote, dozens of denizens from the Domains of Dread. Now, does this mean Darklords? Because that's a given, I guess. Does it mean more Mist Wanderer style NPCs, good NPCs such as Van Richten, Esmeralda, the Weathermay Foxgrove twins? Are we going to get new ones? It's quite exciting. Will they be ones ported over from 2nd and 3rd edition and updated for 5th edition or 5.5e, or are they just going to be brand new made characters, especially for this? There's Domain and Darklord write-ups, for example, Barovia and Strahd, which seems to suggest it's more of a source, on the DM side of things, it's more of a source book than a campaign book. Again, like I said earlier, more Van Richten's Guide than Curse of Strahd. On the teaser pics that they released that show sort of the insides of the book, in the bits where it shows Strahd, it says that the chapter or section is called Domains of Ravenloft. Now, we already had that with Van Richten's Guide. There was a Domains of Ravenloft chapter that listed them all. So there's a debate over whether, is this replacing Van Richten's Guide? Or is it going to complement it and continue on from it? An example could be that Van Richten's Guide went into detail on domains such as Barovia, Folkovnia, Haslan, Valachan, and then less so on other domains. Domains such as Forlorn and the Shadowlands had very small amounts of information. Now, is this going to repeat some of the stuff we already know, or is it going to expand on the ones that didn't get much love the first time around? So we're going to have like pages for the Shadowlands and we get pages for Forlorn. Be interesting to see what happens. Are we going to get brand new Domains of Dread? Are we going to get Domains of Dread that didn't get carried over from earlier editions to Van Richten's guide, but they'll appear in this. They say they're also going to be releasing a map pack. I wondered if this was more domains, but I think it's just going to be sort of combat battle maps, because in one of the promo images there looks like a picture of a graveyard, and I wonder if it's like a gridded map and top-down map for combat, that kind of thing. It also says it's going to have a new style, new design Tarokka deck, a DM screen, and there's going to be some Adventurers League releases coinciding with this as well. What was quite interesting is a few days ago I watched a video by Nerd Immersion, a fellow D&D YouTuber, where he interviewed some of the staff who worked on this. And it's about 20 minutes long, and it covers the whole release schedule, like all 3 seasons, if you will. So the Ravenloft stuff is only, a few minutes long, but they said a lot, and I took out a lot from that few minutes. So they said that there's going to be, including first-party and third-party license releases, there's going to be 20 Ravenloft products during this season, which sounds amazing. 20 sounds like loads. And they described it as, and I quote, a constellation of products. Now, I wondered if this could mean things that are like padding it out, such as the Adventurers League releases could equate to a few. If they do some minis packs, because they did minis for Van Richten's guide, things like that, that could bump the number up to 20. Once we've got the Ravenloft book, some of the other stuff I mentioned earlier, like the Tarokka deck and the DM screen, and that, is that the 20? Or are we going to get more beyond that? Hopefully we do. They mentioned it's 288 pages long. If you want a comparison, Van Richten's guide was 256, so it's about 30-ish extra pages. One of the people described it as being A24/Blumhouse in style. Now, they're 2 movie studios that do a lot of horror movies, things like Paranormal Activity, The Purge, Get Out, Megan, Midsummer, Insidious, Five Nights at Freddy's, those kinds of movies. I don't tend to watch a lot of horror movies. I know that's a shocking thing to say as a Ravenloft DM. But yeah, it kind of gives you an idea and flavour of, I suppose, what they're going for this book. So it's interesting that they've said that and how much the book's content sort of reflect that. They also mentioned who the project lead was, and it's Wes Schneider. Now, Wes Schneider was the project lead for Van Richten's guide. Now, there are Ravenloft fans who didn't like Van Richten's guide. I like it. I came into D&D through 5th edition, through Curse of Strahd and Van Richten's guide. A lot of people who didn't like Van Richten's guide were people who were older fans. Maybe they got into Ravenloft in 2nd or 3rd edition and felt that 5th edition didn't live up to the older editions. It didn't honor it well enough. They changed stuff too much. They rebooted stuff too much. So I know there are people who don't like Van Richten's guide. And so for those people who were apprehensive about this new release, if they hear that Wes Schneider, who is the project lead of Van Richten's guide, is also the project lead of this, I can understand if that makes them a little bit nervous. I don't know. I guess we'll see. I mean, based on the artwork, based on what we've seen so far, it certainly looks like, for people who didn't like Van Richten's guide, it certainly looks like it could be a step up. One thing, I meant to mention this in another video actually, I randomly discovered that Wes was an old Ravenloft fan and contributed to some fanon content about 20 years ago. I think it was like the Book of Sorrows. If I've got that wrong, I'll put some text somewhere that'll correct me. But I was looking for information in the Shadowlands and found that Wes had created some fan content that got published in some fanon resources. So I thought that was quite interesting. He's not just some random guy that Wizards of the Coast just plucked out of the air and said, you do Ravenloft. It sounds like he was a Ravenloft fan from a long time ago, longer than me. Not saying that to sort of jump to his defense or anything, just kind of, it's interesting to understand a bit more about his background and things like that. But I can completely understand people who didn't like Van Richten's guide. If you know it's the same person who led Van Richten's guide as leading Horrors Within, you may form a viewpoint based on that. Okay, let's talk about the art. And I'm going to just change my setup here so that I've got the art in the screen in front of me over here. So firstly, we've got the Strahd art, which is the main cover. It looks great. First thing I picked up on was the slashed portrait of Sergei in the background, which we've kind of already seen before in Van Richten's guide art. And I didn't even notice the ghost behind Strahd and in front of the portrait. And people said, is that a ghost Tatiana? Oh my gosh, it could be a ghost Tatiana. My eyes just kind of didn't even pick up on that, which is, I suppose, is quite fitting given that, it's an artwork of a ghost. It's quite interesting seeing people say, is this AI? Because, I think it's getting to the point now where anyone sees any art and it's like, is that AI? Is that really made? Because it's getting to that point, unfortunately. But argument somebody had was, this must be AI because arms don't bend that way. Talking about the arm that's dangling off the table. No, the arm's bending that way because Strahd has probably twisted it and bent it backwards 180 degrees. That's why that's bent that way. That's not because of AI not knowing how arms work. But that's just cool. It's just Strahd killed a couple of adventurers who tried to kill him, and now he's just chilling with some wine. There's cool art of a knight who looks very dark and unholy, holding a red glowing sword. And I immediately thought and saw other people on forum threads say, is this Ebonbane? Ebonbane is the Dark Lord of the Shadowlands. Now, quite fittingly, in my home game that I've been running the last few years, my players are in the Shadowlands at the moment, and they're probably going to face off against Ebonbane in a few months' time. Might even be in June. So if they are releasing stat blocks for Darklords, like we saw the tease of Cthulhu's stat block, then maybe there'll be an Ebonbane stat block that I can use. I have actually got something in mind. It's the sword in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons tweaked. But hey, it could be cool that I've got something especially. And also the fact that in the background you can see what looks like knights fighting maybe demons. And it looks like the person's just fought a ghoul as well. And demons and ghouls are very heavily tied to Ebonbane in the Shadowlands story. There's some artwork of some Tarokka cards with what looks like pictures of ravens on them floating in the air. Looks like a very ghostly scene. Reminds me of Mordant or the House of Lament. And I didn't even see it straight away, but there's a holy symbol of Ravenkind floating around as well. How cool is that? This one, I didn't know what it was. And then in the EN World thread, people have said, oh, is this the Great Race of Yith? No idea what the Great Race of Yith is, but apparently it's the Great Race of Yith. And they chat about it more in the one of the EN World threads if you want to take a look at that. But like I said, I've included links in the description. There's a weeping ghost in a graveyard that looks pretty cool. There's the alternative cover of Strahd that I didn't even pick up on straight away, but someone said it looks like a Tarokka card design. Oh my gosh, yes, it does look like a Tarokka card design. So maybe it'd be interesting to see when the Tarokka cards come out if they have that kind of style as well to sort of match that cover. Didn't have it in my notes, I nearly overlooked it, but there's cool art of Castle Ravenloft from above, and you can see the village brewery from below. Perspective-wise, this is me being really nitpicky now and saying you haven't honored the law. I don't think the village would be positioned there. I think it'd be sort of behind the castle, not alongside the castle. But hey, it's cool art anyway. Gives you really good flavor. On the 2026 roadmap image, there's a picture of a Death Knight without its helmet, and it looks like Lord Soth. Now, Lord Soth is a Dragonlance villain who had 2 Ravenloft novels, because apparently he went to Ravenloft and then escaped Ravenloft and went back to Dragonlance. It's a whole thing. And this had a few people wondering, is Soth coming back to Ravenloft? But then he's on the thing that says more to come. And this is why I think people are wondering if the Season of Champions is going to be Dragonlance, because you've got Soth there. Soth is like an evil champion, was once a good knight, if you will, who got corrupted and became a Death Knight. So maybe it's not so much that he's to do with Ravenloft, it's more the fact that he's going to be to do with that. And the last image I saw was there was cool artwork of a very misty scene where there's a gate, loads of vines, some ravens as well. Look, feels more Shadowfell than Domains of Dread. So it'll be interesting to see if there's some sort of tie in there to the sort of the wider Shadowfell, where at least in 5th edition, the Domains of Dread live. I'm going to talk next about my theories about what Ravenloft fans want. Do they want a Horrors Within? Do they want something like this or something different? It's a funny one because we already have Van Richten's guide. And is this just a cash grab? You know, the execs at Wizards thinking, hey, people like Ravenloft, let's put out another Ravenloft product. And another sourcebook as well. We had a sourcebook not so long ago. I know 5 years is kind of a long time ago, but there's some settings that probably haven't had a release in that time or at all in 5th edition. And we've had 2. I think for DMs who like to sort of have a bit of information and homebrew from there, like myself when I run my own game, the more information, the merrier, that we can kind of cherry pick and borrow from. I wonder, though, based on my own thoughts and chats and discussions I've seen over the years, I think what Ravenloft fans want is something like Curse of Strahd, but for the wider Domains of Dread. So Curse of Strahd is all contained within Barovia, but an adventure DMs could run where it goes to multiple domains. A bit like Vecna Eve of Ruin, but instead of each chapter being a different setting, each chapter is a different domain of dread. I think that's probably what some Ravenloft fans want. I know Ravenloft Mist Hunters was like this on a small scale, but I imagine that Ravenloft DMs would want a proper physical release. My view on it, though, I'm happy to just get a new book. My view on it is it's all suggestion. So if it ends up being bad, I kind of don't mind because we can just ignore it. I can just, borrow from Banricker's Guide and old lore that I see on Mrpedia and things like that. But if it's good, great. We got more stuff we can play with. The only downside, I guess, is easy for me to say, if it's bad, just ignore it. But if it's bad to the point where it's panned, then the people at Wizards of the Coast might think, well, fine, we're not going to put out any more Ravenloft products for a while. And that would be a shame. But ultimately, I'm happy to see that we're getting something. Could it be great? Could it be terrible? I guess we don't know until it finally comes out. If you know more, if there's stuff I haven't included here, please leave a comment. I'd love to see what you think. Let me know your thoughts anyway about what you're hoping it'll include, or what you think it will include, or if you think I'm wrong with some of the stuff I've said. And I'm considering the weekend after it's released, and it's wide release, so sort of mid to latest June, I might do another Ask Me Anything Let's Chat Ravenloft live stream where we just talk about the book. And maybe I've got it in front of me and I flick through the pages. Matt Colville did this with Volo's Guide to Monsters. I remember watching that back and he was just kind of flicking through it and being like, hey, that looks cool. And I could do that. And I think that would be a good, fun way to spend an hour or so on a Saturday night, or night for me, morning or afternoon for you folks, depending where you are. But yes, keep an eye out for that. That'll probably be sometime in late June. That's it for this one. Like I said earlier, if you haven't subscribed, please consider. If you are interested in the Horrors Within, I am likely to do a lot of videos in the future. Maybe information that you can use in Horrors Within that'll help your Curse of Strahd game. And then the same for if you're running a wider Ravenloft campaign. So if you want to see me talk more about it, in the meantime, if more information comes out, more promo stuff, or when it's finally out, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next few videos. Thanks very much.